What if I told you that the Roman Empire of antiquity and the Holy Roman Empire of the Middle Ages were the exact same thing?
And, we don't just mean they were historically
Right,
similar.
exactly. I mean,
Yeah.
they were literally the exact same sequence of events, just compiled and executed twice, exactly 800 years apart. Like, the architects of our historical timeline just ran out of original assets.
It sounds like science fiction at first. But when you apply modern data forensics to the official historical record, you realize very quickly that what we accept as, the continuous timeline of human evolution is actually full of these massive structural
Yeah,
anomalies.
and let's be absolutely clear with you from the very beginning of this deep dive today. We're not functioning as historians here.
Definitely not. If you're looking for traditional lore or academic consensus, you're honestly in the wrong place.
Yeah, today we are functioning as tech analysts. We're essentially code breakers, and we are debugging a massive, deeply corrupted data set. I've got a dossier in front of me today that combines two massive analytical frameworks. One is called 800-jar cyclus, and the other is the 800-year glitch. And I'll be honest, reading through these documents, I had to stop and physically walk away from my desk a few times
I had the same reaction. Yeah.
because my mind was just blown. The premise here isn't just the old saying that history is written by the victors. The premise is that our entire accepted chronological reality is programmed.
Right. It reads like a literal source code populated with recycled data.
Exactly.
And, my baseline is always highly analytical. I am naturally very skeptical of anything that claims our base reality is
I
fabricated.
don't know, you always want the number.
Always. Before I'm willing to accept that the fundamental timeline of human existence is a manufactured loop, I demand hard empirical data. I need to see the raw code. And what's genuinely disturbing about this data set is that the math actually holds up.
Okay, let's unpack this data set because the numbers really are staggering. But to understand what we're looking at, I need you, the listener, to completely shift your framework for a few minutes.
Yeah, you have to suspend your traditional education for a second.
Exactly. From this point forward, try not to think of historical figures as flesh and blood people. Look at them as avatars.
Or non-playable characters, basically, NPCs in a system.
Right, NPCs. And those ancient manuscripts we rely on, think of them as the compiled code of a matrix. Just the lore. So the very first massive anomaly in this code is what the dataset calls the 800-year algorithmic loop.
And this is where the mathematical impossibility begins. When you plot out the official timeline, it appears engineered in exact 800-year intervals.
It's so weird.
It is. It anchors on year zero, the theoretical birth of Christ, the start of our current epoch, and then it skips precisely 800 years forward to 800 AD, which is the coronation of Charlemagne.
Just a clean 800 years.
Exactly. Statistically speaking, 800 is a very clean, very artificial delta for two era-defining tectonic shifts in human civilization to occur.
It's way too clean. So I looked at the foundational avatars of these two distinct eras to see if the timeline actually held up. In the antiquity dataset, you have the Republic enders, or the first emperors, right? Julius Caesar and Augustus.
Right, matrix node A.
Matrix node A, exactly. Then, exactly 800 years later, in the Middle Ages dataset node B, you have the empire builders, Charles V and Charlemagne.
Now, a traditionalist would argue that, history rhymes, or that leaders just emulate their predecessors.
Sure, they read the old books.
Right. But if you extract the biographical variables of these specific avatars, the synchronization goes far, far beyond emulation. It becomes literal statistical duplication.
Yeah, let's run the actual numbers on this, because this is wild. The avatar known as Augustus dies in the year 14 AD. The avatar Charlemagne dies exactly 800 years later in 814 AD.
Just a perfect loop.
Perfect loop. Let's look at their title acquisitions. Augustus is named the leader of Italy in 32 BC. Exactly 800 years later, Charlemagne is named king of the Franks in 768 AD.
Wow.
It gets crazier. Augustus officially ends the Roman Civil War in 27 BC. Exactly 800 years later, in 773 AD, Charlemagne is called to Italy by the Pope to end their conflicts. I mean, every single major variable in their life path is separated by an exact 800-year delta.
And the standard academic pushback here is that this is simply historiographical inspiration.
Right, like they copied it.
Yeah, the official lore claims that Charlemagne's biographer, a guy named Einhard, simply copied the literary style of the ancient Roman biographer Suetonius, who wrote about Augustus. They call it a classical homage.
But wait, an homage? Writing in a similar style is an homage. Living an identically timed life is not an homage.
Precisely. From a systems analysis perspective, that is not historical inspiration. That is a blatant copy-paste error in the algorithm.
A system error.
Yeah, a system error. The developers who compiled this timeline just got lazy. They literally reused Augustus's character sheet, updated the geospatial coordinates to Western Europe, and rendered him as Charlemagne.
Okay, I was right there with you initially, playing the skeptic, thinking, well, maybe these are just two guys whose biographies were wildly exaggerated by monks.
Sure, that's the logical first thought.
Right. But then I kept reading the dossier and hit the Charles V coordinates. Let me throw this at you, because this is where my skepticism just completely cracked.
Let's hear the variables.
So the avatar Charles V was born in the year 1500. Julius Caesar was born in 100 BC. That is a precise delta of 1,600 years.
Which is a double loop. 2 times 800.
Yes, a perfect double loop. But look at the behavioral scripts here. Caesar was assassinated, effectively ending his reign in 44 BC. Charles V stepped down, resigning his immense power in 1556. Again, exactly 1,600 years later. And here is the kicker, the part that really got me. Both avatars were forced out of their ultimate power by exactly two people. Caesar by Cassius and Brutus, Charles V by his brother Ferdinand and his son Philip. The narrative script is functionally identical, it's just running on a 1,600-year delay.
Which points directly to a fabricated chronology. I mean, when we look at this through a modern tech lens, tweaking an avatar's birth date or death date to fit a mathematical grid doesn't require some grand multi-generational conspiracy involving millions of people.
No, not at all.
It just requires database manipulation by whoever controls the record. Modifying individual character bios is relatively simple. But if this timeline is truly a programmed simulation, the glitch can't be isolated to just the avatars. It has to be embedded in the geopolitical rendering engine itself, the macro events.
Okay, let me stop you right there, because the person listening to this deep dive is probably thinking exactly what I was thinking.
Which is?
They're thinking, sure, a lazy scribe can copy-paste a biography in a dark room. But you can't fake whole wars. You can't just invent massive geopolitical shifts.
That is the logical next question, and it's exactly why we need to open the geopolitical duplication file, because the macro events are looping too. The map itself is reusing assets.
Okay, lay it out for us.
Let's look at the sacking of Rome loop. This is a perfect example of algorithmic recycling. The dataset isolates 4 distinct empire-defining events. File 1. The city of Troy, which functions as Proto-Rome in the lore, falls to the Greeks in 1184 BC.
Okay, 1184 BC.
File 2. Exactly 794 years later, Rome is sacked by the Celts in 390 BC.
794 years.
File 3. Exactly 800 years later, Rome is sacked by the Visigoths in 410 AD.
3.
And File 4. Exactly 794 years later, New Rome, which we know as Constantinople, is sacked by the Crusaders in 1204 AD.
Let me make sure I have that math right. The deltas between these world-altering falls are 794 years, then 800 years, then 794 years again.
Yes.
The symmetry is almost sickening.
It is a completely closed mathematical system. Look at the narrative synthesis of the data. The loop begins with Greeks defeating Proto-Romans in antiquity. It perfectly closes itself when the Latins, or, the descendants of Romans, defeat the Greeks in Constantinople.
Wow.
The geopolitical actors are just being swapped out by the script, but the underlying sequence remains perfectly static.
It's literally like a corrupted spreadsheet. Someone highlight a column A, hit Ctrl C, moved 800 columns to the right and hit Ctrl V, but they just forgot to change the underlying math.
That's exactly what it looks like.
And it's not just Rome. Have you seen the geospatial data on the Teutoburg forest?
The Osnabrück coordinate, yes. This is where the map starts to look like fixed procedural generation.
Exactly. 3 major timeline-altering wars occur in the exact same geographic coordinate, Osnabrück, the Teutoburg forest area. And in all 3 instances, this precise location functions as a permanent algorithmic boundary between imperial power and Germanic independence.
It's a geographical bounding box.
Yes. Look at the dataset, year 9 AD, the Varus battle, Romans versus Germanics. You skip forward roughly 800 years to year 800 AD, the Saxon Wars under Charlemagne, imperial expansion into German territory.
The same exact conflict, essentially.
The exact same. Then you skip forward another 800 years to 1648 AD. The 80 and 30 years war ends right there in Osnabrück, establishing permanent borders against the Habsburgs. It's like the timeline developers reused a boss battle arena. Whenever they needed an imperial conflict, they just spawned the armies at Osnabrück.
And this environmental duplication extends far beyond Central Europe, too. If you analyze the fringes of the map, you find the Iberian and steppe protocols.
Oh, right, the Spain data.
Yeah, we see the exact same reuse assets. In Spain, the official dataset shows us that in 100 BC, the Romans conquer the entire peninsula, except for a tiny northern strip, Asturias and Cantabria.
Right.
Skip forward 800 years to 700 AD. The Visigoths and Muslims conquer the entire peninsula, except for that exact same northern strip. The territorial boundaries are functionally identical.
They just reskinned the Romans as Visigoths. But the literal map boundaries didn't change at all.
The boundaries remained entirely static, and the political directives just looped. Jump forward another 800 years to 1500 AD. The Reconquista ends in 1492. In that exact same year, the Alhambra Decree is issued, expelling the Jewish population from Spain.
Okay.
Now, if you look exactly 800 years prior, to the year 694 AD, the Council of Toledo demanded the exact same expulsion. Statistically, yes, societal behaviors do repeat, but they do not repeat on an exact 800-year timer.
And the Eastern map is doing the exact same thing. You've got the Huns in 451 AD invading Europe, India, and China from the steppes. Then, roughly 800 years later in 1250 AD, the Mongols do the exact same thing.
The same polygon on the map.
Yes. If you overlay their geographical footprints across Eurasia, the rendering is identical. This system is just rendering a massive threat from the east on a permanent 800-year loop.
But if we connect this to the bigger picture, this is the exact moment in the dataset where my initial skepticism completely evaporated.
Really? This was the turning point for you?
Absolutely. Because up to this point, a critical analyst like you or me could argue that texts can be faked.
Sure. Scribes can forge manuscripts, kings can alter their birth dates, you can fabricate the lore, but you cannot duplicate physical, biological, and climatic realities.
Right. If you're listening right now, you're probably yelling at your phone, what about the ruins? What about carbon dating? You can't just fake a winter or a plague.
Exactly. The physics engine doesn't lie. When the timeline code is false, it crashes against the bedrock of the physical world. Let's examine the corrupted climate data. The missing catastrophe file.
This one is wild.
The official compiled history claims there was a massive Roman climate crash in the 6th century, specifically around 535 AD. The ancient texts describe snow in summer, a blocked-out sun, massive crop failures.
Total environmental collapse.
Right. Then the lore claims there was a second medieval climate crash in the 14th century, around 1315 AD.
Two distinct climate crashes, separated by our magic number, roughly 800 years. That is what the written text says. But today, we don't have to rely on monks writing by candlelight. We have modern scientific validation protocols. Dendrochronology, which is the study of tree rings and ice core data.
Because the physical Earth records it.
Exactly. Tree rings grow differently based on temperature and precipitation, providing an immutable physical record of climate. A massive 2019 study published by Newcom analyzed tree rings and ice cores globally over the last 2,000 years, and it proved unequivocally that the 6th century climate crash never happened.
Wait, it's just not there on the ice.
It does not exist in the physical record. It is a phantom file. The physical data shows there was only one drastic global temperature drop, and it began in the late 13th century.
No way.
The authors of our timeline simply took the real 14th century climate data, copied it, and pasted it 800 years into the past to give their antiquity era some dramatic texture. But they couldn't copy-paste the ice cores.
They manipulated the spreadsheet but forgot they couldn't patch the physics engine. That is unbelievable.
It's the ultimate system crash. But it actually gets worse. Let's look at the bioglitch, the plague anomaly.
Oh, man.
This is the final undeniable proof that the chronology is fabricated.
Yeah, this is the one. Walk us through the genetic singularity, because this is where the biological impact breaks the whole simulation wide open.
According to the official timeline, you have the Justinian plague, the greatest biological catastrophe of antiquity, beginning in 542 AD. Then you have the Black Death, the greatest biological catastrophe of the Middle Ages, beginning in 1347 AD.
Okay, 542 and 1347.
If you calculate the delta between these two supposedly distinct global pandemics, they are separated by exactly 805 years.
There's that 800-year loop again. But what happens in between? I mean, biologically, pathogens mutate, they linger, there are regional flare-ups.
Nothing happens in between.
Nothing.
The lore asks us to believe that there was a 600-year void where a highly contagious world-ending biological agent simply vanished. During the so-called glorious Middle Ages, You know, the time of the Carolingians, the Ottonians, unsanitary, densely packed, plague-ripe Europe, there are 0 recorded plagues.
That makes no sense.
The pathogen disappears completely, only to return perfectly on schedule 800 years later.
Which is absurd. A plague doesn't just check a calendar and take a 6th century vacation.
It is scientifically impossible. But the true system crash was discovered when geneticists finally sequenced the DNA of the pathogen. Modern scientists extracted the DNA of Yersinia pestis from the dental pulp of skeletons in graves, supposedly dating to the 6th century Justinian plague.
Okay.
Then they extracted it from victims of the 14th century Black Death.
Let me guess. They ran the sequences, and what did the code show?
The genomes are identical. There is 0 genomic divergence.
Zero.
0. In evolutionary biology, a pathogen mutating over 800 years would show distinct genetic drift. There is none. In fact, genomic sequencing published in the journal Nature proved that the specific strain of the Black Death pathogen first emerged in humans in the 13th century.
Wait, hold on. I need to process this. If the genome unequivocally proves this specific strain first emerged in humans in the 13th century, how could scientists be extracting it from 6th century graves?
They couldn't. Genetically, biologically, they cannot be separated by 800 years. They are not 2 events. They are the exact same event.
Wow.
The timeline has collapsed. The pathogens are identical because the victims died in the exact same pandemic. The developers of our history simply took the 14th century plague, duplicated the text file, and dropped into the 6th century to flesh out the lore of the Justinian avatar. But DNA does not lie. The chronology is a complete fabrication.
That is just, it's staggering. It completely upends everything we think we know about where we come from. The DNA literally proves that this 800-year gap is empty space. It's just a placeholder.
The placeholder in the code, yeah.
But that leaves a massive, glaring question. Who did this? Who had root access to the timeline of human history to compile it this way?
The data points directly to the 16th century, specifically to a father-son duo of chronologists, Julius Caesar Scaliger and Joseph Justus Scaliger.
Who were they? Like, why do they have the authority to rewrite the entire global timeline?
During the Renaissance, there was a desperate need to unify global history. You had the biblical timeline, the Egyptian timeline, the Greek, and the Roman, but they just didn't line up. The Scaligers were tasked with creating a cohesive, unified, chronological framework.
Right, but they didn't have our tools.
Exactly. They didn't have carbon dating. They didn't have genome sequencing. They just had paper and massive political pressure. So to make the fragmented histories fit together, they used what we would recognize today as a spreadsheet method.
They just padded it.
They padded the timeline. They looped the geopolitical maps, recycled the avatars, and duplicated the trauma of their own era, the plagues, the climate crashes into a fictitious past to fill the gaps.
They literally padded the code to make it run smoothly. So why does this matter to you, listening right now? Why should you care that a couple of 16th century chronologists copy-pasted some maps and avatars centuries ago?
It's the ultimate question.
Because it proves that what we accept as base reality, our foundational data set of human progress, the very concept of a linear journey from the past to the present, can be a wholly constructed narrative. It's software.
It is entirely software.
And if you don't look at the source code, if you just blindly accept the lore you're handed because it's printed in a textbook, you're just playing a rigged game. You are existing in a matrix that someone else compiled.
Exactly. The assumption of linearity is a massive vulnerability in our own cognitive systems. Once you understand the mechanics of the glitch, once you see how easily a timeline can be manipulated, you really cannot unsee the loop.
Which leaves us with one incredibly chilling question to process as we log off today. If our past is simply compiled simulation built on reused assets, 800-year loops, and phantom files programmed by a few guys with a quill in the 16th century, what algorithm is running our present, and when is the next glitch scheduled to render?